Smell like booty and death.
But I remember that I was I want to see like the other classes like
Monday is day.
oh today's the today's the
Read this 21 first week right after, right?
oh Monday's the
That means we have 11.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's going to be.
Yeah, we just heard that lab day one time.
Alex Miranda. Who bought that $100 calculator?
oh we're doing that to this weekend because Monday's kind of tight.
That's him.
$2 yeah.
That's like coming out of Bob's pocket. That's not coming out of nobody. He's like, he's really concerned about it.
You feel me? They should provide it.
I'm a board
It's so hot. Like that just like what?
I was complaining like.
it's popping.
You guys should all be working on your do now, page 21, read the first couple paragraphs, a short summary. This goes in your notes and nothing like it.
You are gonna do that?
If not.
So you want to start an experimental group size?
Yes. Bianca?
Here.
Yeah. Haley. Are you Haley? Yes, that person was tonight. You're Ryan, right? What's your name? started. First things, you guys have a lab day once a week. It's day A. That'll start on Monday. So next week, Monday will be day A. There's 5 lab days. It'll stay Monday for a while until we have a day off, then it'll move to Tuesday or Wednesday. So it won't always be Monday, but next week it'll be Monday. So you gotta know to come here third period, don't go to gym. Don't be late. I won't always remind you. Second thing, uniforms. So those of you who are not in uniform probably got written up 3 times today already. Starting Monday, it'll be a 4th one for me. Today I'm not going to do it, so I figured I'd give you a chance to tell you about it. So just so you know, red stripes no good, no collar. I think your shirt, let me see your shirt. Yeah, that's a little bit, it's like a sheer material. It's not quite solid enough. It's kind of like borderline there. Yours is kind of see-through. Well, you got a black shirt actually, so you're good. Yours is not solid color, so that's also a uniform. So starting Monday, make sure it's a solid color, make sure it's not see-through, make sure it has a collar. Okay. Other things, that's pretty much it. All right, let's talk about this dude out here. What's this about? Somebody raise your hand. What you reading about here? What's your name? Haley, go ahead.
The shift of observational science to precise data measurement, like
Right.
scientific method.
Because early on, a lot of stuff we're just, what do we see, what's going on. But then once we discovered everything you can do with that, then we had to really start making more measurements to see the small things that aren't so obvious every day. What else? Tell me your name.
India.
India.
Antoinette Lawrence, advisor. She made science not based on observation but on measurement.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the most important people in the history of chemistry. He actually, a guy. It's okay. It's a French name, they always confuse people. But yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit about him today. Him and one other guy named Robert Boyle, the 2 people who really helped turn chemistry into a real science. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the history of chemistry. So let's get started. And so with this, you're going to get a little bit of the scientific method. You're going to get a little history of Western civilization, and all this stuff goes together. So, history of chemistry, that's the topic. And then after today, tomorrow, we're going to talk about safety for 2 days, and we'll spend about a week or 2 on math, and then at some point late in September, I'll actually start talking about chemistry. All right, so our story here starts around 800 BC in ancient Greece. So that's where all good stories start. So this is what's called the Golden Age of Greece, from about around 800 BC until 336 when King Philip conquered southern Greece. Was it 338? I don't know, whatever, you can look it up. Anyway, so what happened in ancient Greece? Well, this product came over from Egypt. It really changed things. And what was the product? Okay. All right. It was called papyrus. Really, papyrus. I mean, we don't I sound in ancient Greece. Only American, a few other languages have I sounds. Well, English not right. In English, don't say much. Anyway, papyrus arrived in Greece. So there was writing before this arrived, but if you're writing on stone, well, you write a few things, and then you kind of run out of space, right? Once you have paper, this is basically paper. It's the first version of paper. Once you have paper, now you can write a lot more things down. And so the question is, what did the Greeks write? Well, they wrote a few things. You can probably guess. Anybody want to guess? What's your name? Brian.
Odyssey.
Yes, they did. Homer was wonderful. Yes, the Odyssey and the Iliad, 2 of the greatest, well, 2 of the first books ever written. They wrote a lot of stuff. Philosophy, history, democracy, a lot of these things were invented or came from ancient Greece. But what I want you to know is that they wrote down stuff that they saw. They just looked around and wrote what was going on. Hey, look, there's a butterfly. They wrote it down. So they started writing down what they see around them. And then what do you think they did after they wrote down the stuff that they saw? What's your name?
Travis.
Travis.
Make some kind of religion.
Yeah, they made up some religions. We're not interested in that. Tell me your name, Haley, again.
Why the stuff that they saw happen?
Exactly. They ask questions about the stuff. And after they ask the questions, what do you think happened next?
They probably trying to look for the answers.
Right. What's your name? Chupus. Yeah, they wrote their answers down. They said, what do you think the answer is? They really may not have been right answers, but it was their answers. We could put guesses in parentheses, what they thought they were. This is great. It's a good start. Unfortunately, they stopped here. And from here, if they had a disagreement as to what the answers were, they would just argue about their answers. And whoever argued better, they would win. People would agree with that person, and that was the end of it. It's a good start. That's where the Greeks left off. A couple of useful Greeks we need to know about. This guy named Democritus. He lived from 460 to 370 BC. Remember, the numbers go backwards in the BC thing, right? This guy said, I think things are made of atoms. And if he didn't talk about atoms, we wouldn't care about it in this place.
How do they know what atoms were?
Well, that's a great question, right? And I guess really what you're really asking me is, what did he think atoms were? What was he saying when he just invented this word atom? So, if you think about it, if you take something, right, it doesn't matter what, any object, and you cut it in half, you have a smaller object. If you chop that in half, you have a smaller object. And if you chop that in half, you have a smaller object. You can keep doing this, so many times. And the question is, do you eventually get down to a smallest thing, or can you keep cutting it in half forever? And that's the argument here. Is there a smallest thing, and we'll call it an atom, or can you keep cutting things in half until the particles just get smaller and smaller and smaller? And so that's what his idea was. There's a smallest thing in each that things are made out of, and these smallest things are called atoms, things that you can't cut in half. Now some other guys, wait. Plato and Aristotle, Aristotle's Plato's student, right, said he was wrong. Plato and Aristotle are two of the smartest people who ever lived. They were two of the first important philosophers. Plato wrote down all the stuff that Socrates said, remember, because Socrates didn't write anything down. And these two were very well known. And so since they were so popular and so smart, whatever they said kind of won. So most people went with their idea. They agreed with them instead of Democritus and said, okay, things are not made of atoms because these guys say they're not. Okay. Travis Ryland. Okay, at the end of the period, go to guidance. Okay, so they said things are not made of atoms. Everybody agreed with them because they were the smartest guys. All right, now, ancient Greece falls apart, right? Some new people come along and take over. Who takes over? Who's next in history? Who said that? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand.
Oh,
Haley.
they're Romans.
Wonderful answer. Good job. All right, so the Romans. Romans come along. They conquer the Greeks, right? The Greeks just don't have as good a system of government as the Romans do, so the Romans are able to take over. The Romans are more organized. We're going to say the Romans are from 100 BC to 476 AD. Yes?
When was the Bible written?
It depends, and there is, debate over this. The Old Testament, some of the first 5 books were written around probably 1000-ish BC. Even if people don't agree on this number, so let's say around then, somewhere between 1500 and 800, I'd say. The other books are written after that, 800 BC up till,
Well, they're not technically written, they're epic poems like the Odyssey.
Right, and I'm not, anyway, I don't want to get too far into this, but then after the New Testament, we've written after 0 AD, so from 50 AD to 150 or something like that. So around the Roman time period would be the New Testament. Okay, so Romans 100 BC to 476 AD. Where am I going with this story? The Romans took what the ancient Greeks had invented and they used it to build an empire. So used Greek knowledge to build an empire. So the Greeks studied things just because they enjoyed studying them. They didn't care. But the Romans took what was useful for that the Greeks had discovered, and they used it to build roads, to build sewage, to build fresh water, aqueducts and things like this, so they could build cities and build up their empire. They're kind of like the engineers. The Greeks were more like scientists. They just studied stuff for fun. The Romans used science, so that's kind of more like engineering. The Romans spread has an R in it, spread Greek ideas throughout Europe, and some of their own too. Okay, 476, give or take, 50 years. Rome falls apart. Western Rome, anyway. Eastern Rome stays there, but we changed the name later on. Started calling it the Byzantine Empire. Anyway, what period comes next in European history?
The Dark Ages.
Wonderful, the Dark Ages. So what happened was, the government loses control, the emperor, and since he's no longer in power, smaller kingdoms form within the Roman Empire, and then they start fighting each other, and then individual cities start fighting each other, and towns start fighting each other. And so at some point you're some little village and you think you're safe because you're in Rome, which is wonderful, and then you're attacked by the village next to you because they don't have food, and they take all your food and kill all your men and rape all your women and do all this stuff that's not really good. And you're like, wow, that sucks. And so now you got to go find food, you got to go kill people in the next village and take their food, and so on and so forth. And when all this fighting is going on and struggle for survival, you don't have time to do your homework. So what does that mean? People stop teaching their kids how to read. And they stop teaching their kids how to read, and they stop teaching their kids how to read. Within a few generations, everyone's illiterate. Everyone is illiterate. So things go backwards. Things are wonderful in Rome, now they're horrible. There's no government, life is terrible, people can barely survive, lots of people die, and they don't read. That's why we call it the Dark Ages. All right, what's the next time period there, Haley?
The Renaissance.
Missed one.
Medieval.
Yeah, medieval or Middle Ages. Middle Ages, we're going to say it's 1000 to 1300-ish, right? It's like if you said, when did the computer age start? Did it start in 79?
1945. 1945, first computer invented.
Right, but then nobody used a computer then, right? So is that really the computer age? Or do you want to say it's when the Apple II was invented in the 70s, or when the Altair 5 came out? But what I'm getting at is, historians pick dates and they say, okay, this event is going to be the beginning or end of this. So, people may disagree, but maybe somebody says it should be 1400, whatever. So dates are oftentimes rough, and that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, so some governments form. And any government is better than no government. So life starts to get better. This is called the feudal system here. This is where the lords are in charge and the rest of the people are serfs and they work on the land. And it's not real great for them, but it's better than having no government because they're not being killed all the time. So things are a little bit better, right? If you ever, care anything about the world, no government's the worst thing you can ever have, right? Anything's better than that. All right, so some people now, a few people, the lords, the people who are in charge of the swords and the armor, some people have time to read or learn to read. I'm telling all this for a reason, all right? I'm getting at something here that I want you to see in a second. You know, what kind of impact did it have on these people when they learned to read, and then they start finding these ancient works from a long time ago, they say, wow, these are all great books, right? And what did that make them think? So, they read the ancient books. Obviously, books don't last 1,000 years, so they must have been rewritten a few times. They were saved in the bottom right corner of Europe, right, the Byzantine Empire, and then also in Ireland. There were still people literate up there. And so they rewrote these books, they saved them, they had copies. So they found these ancient books in Europe, and they said, oh, wow, this is great. These guys were geniuses. You know, how did they know so much 2,000 years ago, and today we don't know anything, we're just learning to read again. So if you discovered books from 2,000 years ago where people knew more stuff than you know now, you might think those people knew everything. You might think they're always right. Always. They're never wrong. Everything written in these ancient books must be right. And this was good that we discovered these ancient books because there's a lot of useful information in there, but it slowed things down because people wouldn't go against anything that was written in these ancient works. And so that kind of held up progress a little bit. Until, what was the next time period, Haley?
Renaissance.
The Renaissance. And this is like the wonderful time, like a breath of fresh air. Like if I turned on the air conditioner now, right, that's what it would feel like. Although there is no air conditioner now. Renaissance. I think there's two S's? Whatever. Renaissance. We're going to call this 1300 to 1700 maybe. Let's say that. All right. Renaissance. What happened in the Renaissance? Well, a few things, but one thing that I care about that I want you to know about is someone, a few people, questioned, the ancient guys. A few people did, if you remember, somebody got hung for it, I think, right? Somebody else almost did, Galileo, right? Same thing. So people started saying, hey, maybe some of these ancient books are wrong, right? And one guy who did this and who started testing these things was a guy named William Gilbert. For our purposes, we're going to say he was the first scientist. If you look up his name on the internet, they'll put a T at the end, but he would have put a D on the end, so we're going to put a D. He was, when did he live? 1544 to 1603. William Gilbert tested his ideas and other people's ideas to see if they're right. He tested them. What's another word for that?
Experiments.
Right, he experimented. And this is like the whole point of this entire story. This right here is when science is born. This is the beginning of everything. This is what separates science from every other subject out there, is that when we have an idea, we test it to see if it's right. And if our experiment says, no, it's wrong, things don't fall upward, they fall downward, we change our idea, we say, okay, this is what's really true. And that's science. This is the beginning right here. And now if you look back and think about what happened over these 2,000 years, right? What happened? The ancient Greeks, right? What did they do? They looked around, right? Then what did they do? They asked questions. And then they guessed the answers, right? But it wasn't until 2,000 years later, during the Renaissance, that somebody tested these answers. And from that, drew conclusions. That is the scientific method. That's what separates us. And this here, number 4, testing your ideas is the most important step in the scientific method. All right, once this happens, lots of people start using this idea of testing and doing experiments. There's a few people I want you to know about. 30, right? 10:30? 15 minutes? All right. So there's 6 people I want you to know. And this will be the end of this lesson. Robert Boyle, 1627 to 1691. So this is a little later than William Gilbert. Worked or experimented with pressure and invented the J tube. He did a lot of other stuff too. A lot of stuff. I mean, you don't become as famous as he is just from one or two big discoveries. He did a lot. And the other guy, and these two are important, is Antoine, this is the guy you read about, Lavoisier. At least I think that's how you say it. Those French words are always funny. And he's what, 1754? Is that right? 1743. So you're 1794. He didn't live very long, right? What happened to him? That's not very helpful. Obviously he died. He got hung, right? He got his head chopped off. Not hung, he got chopped off. He had made a bad investment. Well, he made a good investment in a tax farm, but then this French Revolution thing happened. They chopped his head off. We were kind of upset about that. Okay, so anyway, worked on conservation of mass. Of the law that says that things cannot be created or destroyed. Metric system. Discovered oxygen. Or helped discover it. I'm sure he worked with other people. All these things. These two guys made several really big discoveries. These are the most important guys in the history of chemistry. Most important. In physics, we have one guy, it's Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientists ever. For chemistry, it's split between 2 guys. It's these guys. These guys invented chemistry. All right, 4 more. These other guys are less important, but still very important. Each one's going to kind of represent a chapter that we're going to study. John Dalton is next. 1766, right? 1766 to 1844. John Dalton showed that things are made of atoms. Now remember, there was that guy 2500 BC, right? What's his name? Democritus said things are made of atoms. John Dalton had evidence. He experimented. That's why he gets credit, right? Democritus had his argument. He didn't have experiments. All right, so Dalton's atomic theory, that'll be a big thing we'll study. Next is Dmitri Mendeleev. Or Mendeleev, I don't know. Not sure how we're supposed to say this. I'm sure if you ask Miss Smokey across the hallway, she'll be upset that I'm not sure which one's right. Pronunciation's almost as unimportant as spelling. 1907, and this guy put together the periodic table. He organized the elements in a way that made it easy for us to understand them. The ones that are in the same vertical column have similar chemical properties. The ones that we color the same up there have similar physical properties. And so it makes it really easy for us to look up the periodic table and understand, oh, okay, those 2 things near each other, they must be similar. 2 more people. Who's next? J.J. Thompson? J.J. Thompson. J.J. Thompson discovered the electron. Remember I told you that would be the number 1 thing we're going to talk about in here for a long time. He and his son both won the Nobel Prize for different things. him for discovering the electron, and his son for saying the electron was a wave. And, oops, no, Ernest Rutherford, last guy. And this guy is 1871 to 1937. He said atoms have a nucleus. Right, that means that the protons and neutrons are stuffed in this tiny little spot in the middle. They're not spread throughout the atom like electrons are. That's it. The history of chemistry question.
Does J.J. Thompson have a date too?
J.J. Thompson should have a date. Why not? 1856 to 1940. 1856, you're not going to be able to see that. 1856 to 1940. There we go. Other questions? All right. So that's it for the history of chemistry. The next 2 days we will be doing safety. After that, we'll spend about a week and a half to 2 weeks where I'll just teach you math. And then after that's over, at some point, we'll actually talk about chemistry. Thank you. There's some numbers I'm not good with. Allie, I need you to do me a favor. See that phone up there? It's recording my lecture. I need you to stop it. Can you do that? If you can't, I'll ask somebody else.
I am wearing a skirt.
All right. How about this kid next to you? What's your name? Can you do that for me? Just push stop. It'll be the same button as play. The right red button on the right. Just tap it.